Hey everybody, I want to talk to you today about your ideal client avatar, and I know that that's a phrase that's been kind of thrown around here a little bit, but I get a lot of the same questions over and over again as the landlord coach, and this is one I feel that I maybe it's a little bit better if I can approach it with the end in mind. One of the typical questions I get is, how do I get started? And that's generally, or how do I build my portfolio? A lot of people are asking for private money and things like that. A lot of people who are already in the game, they ask a lot of the same questions: is how do I get my tenants to do it what I just simply want them to do, right? Get them to pay rent and things like that. I think that that's all the same fruit of the same tree, and I'm going to explain this here in just a second. I think when getting started, people are often, they're not thinking about they're thinking about the mechanism, right? They're thinking about the, how do I get funding, like where do I find the deal, right? Those sorts of things, which is again an important consideration. But I think that they really need to start thinking about it in a slightly different way. And for those of you who are already in the game, this might mean a sea change for the direction that you're currently heading in. So I think that you have to first establish the market first, understand the market that you're trying to approach first, because I think what a lot of people are doing is they get into a rental property and then they see who is going to rent it, right? Which there's always going to be a component of the population that's going to rent. That's just the way it is. That's why I like single family dwellings. In my approach, my market, I don't have a vacancy problem. Never have had a vacancy problem. Single family dwellings have always worked well for me. I like 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, garage, fenced yard, that sort of thing. Tend to like more modern houses. But that doesn't mean that I don't have some 2 bedroom little matchboxes that are just, they're small, they're not great, they were built in the 40s or 50s, need a lot of maintenance, that I've done over the years and probably still need some more to be done. So I've had both. I've had a mix of both. The ones that have performed the best for me are the ones that are newer, that are more modern. They generate a higher dollar in terms of rent, and they attract a client avatar that I much rather prefer to deal with. Now, it's not a it's let me just say it this way: it's a quality of person issue, right? It's certainly not a question of race. I really don't care. You come to me and you're qualified, I'm going to rent to you. I seriously don't care about that. It's not a question of anything that's related to anything that is illegal, fair housing wise, or anything like that. And if you're not familiar with fair housing and you're going to do this as a profession, you need to get intentional about learning those laws, because that can bite you bad. And there is no amount of insurance. Insurance won't cover something like that if you make a mistake with that. And most mistakes are actually made in advertising, just in case you were wondering. And it's usually like, hey, got a really cute house located by this Catholic church. You can't do that. That is steering. You cannot do that. And if you don't know what steering is, look it up. I'm not trying to make this into a fair housing course, though. My point, though, is you really need to understand the type of client avatar that you're looking for. So what do I mean? Say you have a university that's close to you and you don't want to rent to students, okay? And you don't have to because they're not a protected class, but you really want to, there's a fairly high demand for professors that come in and out of the university area, right? And you've got multiple avenues of people that can come to you that want to rent that. And you like dealing with academics, right? You like dealing with that type of clientele. That's perfect. That's a great client avatar. Let's say, for argument's sake, that you have a house that is in a very highly desirable school district, and there's a plant nearby, a manufacturing facility that brings in people and families for 2 to 3 year stints at a time, right? That's a perfect type of client avatar, because that's a highly desirable school district. That's where a lot of those people like to come in. Again, I don't care if they're white, black, blue, or green. I don't care if they're Catholic, Jewish, Muslim. I don't care. All I care about is that they are well qualified. And that's all that you should care about. And if you have other thoughts, then you are not a good client for me. I can't help you. But what I'm saying is, if they're well qualified, and it should have, and that means, obviously that's a whole other course, a whole other discussion, but making sure they have the income requirements, making sure that they have the there's no felonies or whatever it is, whatever your standards are. Those are the sorts of things that I want to make sure that you understand, and that you're screening for, and that you have processes for. Once you identify your avatar and your market first of who you want to go towards, then you get the properties that best suit them. Everybody does it seemingly backwards, where they get a property that's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, which are hard to market, right? They're hard to rent, because you're competing against 3-bedroom houses for the same price. I'm just giving you an example. Maybe your market's a little different, but I'm just saying you wind up in a property just because it was a good deal, meaning low price, but it wasn't necessarily a good deal, because now you're dealing with vacancy expense, now you're dealing with collection issues, now you're dealing with a client avatar that you don't really want to deal with, right? That's my point. So I'm wrapping this into a discussion of developing a client avatar and making sure that you have a mind towards fair housing laws. Because if you say for one moment, well, I want to rent to a family of a certain race, color, creed, nationality, we can't be friends anymore. That is not only bad business, it's illegal, and you cannot do that. You should not do that. You rent to people who are qualified, but that doesn't mean you can't develop a client avatar for your ideal client is when they come in, because they want to deal with you, right? Because they trust you. I'll give you a perfect example. In fact, I'll give you the example in terms of what happened with me. I'm a Marine, okay? I'm not a retired Marine. I'm just no longer on payroll. But I served for 4 years in the Marine Corps. For a very extended period of time, I had recruiters that would come to the area, buy a house, and then they would leave, right? Well, then that recruiter would say, hey, well, I really don't want to sell my house. Would you manage it for me? Sure. And sometimes a new recruiter would come in looking for a place to live, and they didn't want to buy, so I could rent that property to them. And that was an ideal client avatar for me, because they trusted me as a fellow jarhead. They knew that I was going to do right by them, and it was a constant cycle in and out of people that had properties, right? So that was an ideal client avatar for me. And that is something that you probably have a fair amount of people that are like that, whether they're in your church group, whether they're in your university setting, whether they're in your current work environment, whatever that is. There are people out there that you can easily serve, okay? So that's what I'm talking about, is developing the client avatar. And I want you to write down, where do they shop? What kind of cars do they drive? What are their names? Give a name for them, Jack and Diane, whatever that is. Whatever the name is that you want to name their avatar, identify them. Do they have children? Do they not have children? Now again, they are a protected class, whether it's family, familial status, whatever. But I'm just saying, this is a pretend family, right? If someone comes to you that's well qualified, that doesn't have kids or does have kids, let them in, right? It doesn't matter. That you cannot discriminate based on familial status. But I'm just saying, it doesn't mean that you can't develop an avatar as who your ideal client is. If I have a 4-bedroom house, my ideal avatar would more likely be someone who's got a couple kids, right? Ideally, they've got a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. They're going to want to stay in that same school district for, until they graduate. I mean, that's an ideal client avatar, right? Now, if they come to me and they don't have kids and they're qualified, I don't care. I'll rent to them. That's no problem. I'm just saying, once you identify who your ideal avatar is, that'll be put out. You can put that out to the world and say, hey, I've got this 4-bedroom house, and it's it's got a fenced yard, it's got 2.5 car garage, which is going to tend to attract people who are more closely to your client avatar. Does that make sense? So I know I'm walking a really fine line here, and I am not a fair housing trainer, but I just want you to understand that you can identify your ideal avatar, but make sure that you are not violating fair housing, and you need to understand what that all is. So again, it's kind of a wonky, I know this is a really kind of a wonky video between identifying your target market and understanding what the laws are in terms of in terms of fair housing, because I don't even want to pretend to know you if you're going to be trying to steer people away or towards houses because of protected classes. That is just not cool. All right, have a great day, guys. Keep your foot on the gas, and remember, if you don't place the value in your free time, someone else will. Take care.